So, I'm back with more types of video game sequels. I thought of so many more weird sequels while editing the last video, so let's get straight into it. This might be a long one. Anyways, make sure to tickle that subscribe button and let's go. Now, most of these examples are in the last category of the last video, which was the what the hell do these count as sequels. Let's start with a series that was actually in the last video, Final Fantasy. I brought up Final Fantasy 16 having an action focus, and the FF7 remake games with a unique tactical combat, but I forgot to mention a specific type of genre within Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy 11 and Final Fantasy 14 are both MMOs. The weird part isn't that there's an MMO Final Fantasy game, they just tried something new with the series, which I applaud them for, but making them mainline numbered entries between more traditional Final Fantasies like Final Fantasy 10 and 12 is kinda weird to me. They could've just called it something else and not made it like a numbered entry, but I mean, I guess it is what it is. On the topic of RPGs, let's talk about Yakuza. Like a Dragon changed the genre of the series from action-based to turn-based like I discussed in my last video. This is one of the most ballsiest things I've ever seen. I respect the hell out of them for doing this. It's not like they've given up on action-based combat either. Some of the new games that came out after Like a Dragon have still had action combat. I also talked about this in my last video, but Persona 5 Strikers and Fire Emblem 3 Hopes are weird sequels as well. Both are action-based and are traditionally turn-based franchises. Persona 5 Strikers is technically a sequel to Persona 5, but it seems to be retconned now by Persona 5 Royal. Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes is a sequel to Fire Emblem Warriors, but it doesn't continue the story like that. Instead, continuing the story on Fire Emblem 3 Houses, except it's actually an alternate universe where Violet doesn't exist. I don't know, man, I never played this game. Or the original Fire Emblem Warriors, but I have played 3 Houses. Fire Emblem normally works similarly to Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest, where each new game is a new world and characters, at least for the most part. Some of these games are set in the same world, like Binding Blade and Blazing Blade are in the same world, Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn are in the same world, or even Awakening, Shadow Dragon, Guidance / Echoes, Genealogy of the Holy War, Thracia, and New Mystery of the Emperor. Wow, they're more connected than I thought. Engage also kind of connects them all, as it's sort of a celebration of Fire Emblem. Dragon Quest follows a similarly weird path, where Dragon Quest 1 to 3 are all connected, but Dragon Quest 3 takes place before 1 and 2. The rest are mostly separate as far as I know. But Fire Emblem and Dragon Quest have pretty similar gameplay for each entry in the series compared to Final Fantasy, which is different, so that's where those kind of differ. Then there's the Nier series. Now Nier is technically a continuation of the Drakengard series, aka Dragon Dragoon in Japan. Now bear with me here because I don't really know what I'm talking about because I haven't played any of the Drakengard games, or even Nier, or Nier Replicant. I just played Nier Automata. So here we go. Drakengard 1 has 5 endings, which is a common thing in these games. Ending A leads into Drakengard 2, but Yoko Taro had no involvement in that game, so it's kinda ignored. Drakengard 3 isn't a continuation of 2, but rather it's a prequel to the first game. Now Drakengard 3 is where it gets weird, if it wasn't already weird. Ending A apparently leads into an alternate version of Drakengard, while ending D of Drakengard 3 prevents what happens going forward. But ending E leads into Drakengard 1. Now Nier, or Nier Replicant, takes place after ending E of Drakengard 1. So Drakengard 1 actually leads into Drakengard 2 and Nier. And Nier itself has 2 versions, Nier Gestalt or Gestalt and Nier Replicant. Gestalt has a father as the main character apparently, and Replicant has a brother as the main character of the character Nier. Then thousands of years after that, Nier Automata takes place based off the ending E of Nier 1. This is on another level of crazy, but it's also crazy respectful having such deep lore that actually connects, especially with 2 different series. While there is this connection between these games, you can still play them individually. That's what I did, because I played Nier Automata without playing any of the other ones. Nier Automata was developed by Platinum Games, so it has a much bigger emphasis on the gameplay and combat compared to the older games, which only really focus on story, because Yoko Taro apparently doesn't really care much about gameplay. Then there's Nier Reincarnation, which is a mobile game that got discontinued and taken down, but the game is canonically Nier 3, so the stuff from that game is just gone now. That game also apparently connected Nier Replicant and Nier Automata more, and it had like a little girl as the main character, but yeah, now it's just gone. The only way to really experience that is by seeing videos that got posted of it. Now, let's shift away from these deep RPGs and stuff and talk about some silly Nintendo games like Donkey Kong 64. When the move from 2D to 3D was happening in the 5th gen of consoles, a bunch of franchises had to change up the core gameplay to adapt to this new shift. Some of these shifts were made pretty perfectly, like Mario 64 having an open exploration formula, or Ocarina of Time also having an open exploration formula. These first few 3D games made in each series determined the path for all the future games ahead. Like Ocarina of Time became the blueprint for all future 3D Zeldas until Breath of the Wild finally changed it up. And companies really tried 3D with a lot of franchises. Mario, Zelda, Donkey Kong, Metroid, Sonic, Mega Man, Castlevania, Wario. Yeah, some of these just didn't work. Castlevania, Donkey Kong, and Wario have mostly stuck to 2D after their initial 3D attempts. Wario World and Donkey Kong 64 never got sequels. DK64 somewhat makes sense why it didn't get a sequel, because Rare was bought by Microsoft, so there was a period where Nintendo just didn't know what to do with DK. I guess they just never wanted to make a sequel to Wario World though. I think there's definitely potential with another 3D DK game, and even another 3D Wario game. They would definitely be interesting. Castlevania has got a few more 3D entries though, but the ones on N64 weren't received that well to my knowledge. Metroid worked well in 3D, as 2D was still being continued on like handhelds, and the 3D Metro Prime games got 3 entries on GameCube and Wii, with the 4th one finally coming out this year, at least I hope. Mega Man got Mega Man Legends on the 5th gen consoles, as well as Mega Man X7, but apparently it was supposed to have a Metroid Prime 3D style game that got cancelled that was called Maverick Hunter. Sonic also had a rough transition to 3D. I'm kidding. It really wasn't that bad. Yeah, Sonic 3D Blast was kind of a weird first 3D game for the series, and Sonic Extreme got cancelled. The Sonic Adventure got the 3D perfected for Sonic. They really had a good foundation for what a 3D Sonic game should be like. Sonic Adventure 2 also had a solid foundation, albeit with some differences. But with this perfect style, you'd think they'd stick with it, right? Well, they started doing other random styles of 3D Sonic after Adventure 2. Sonic Heroes was pretty different, focusing on swapping between each of the 3 members of the trio. Sonic 06 is somewhat considered to be Adventure 3 by some people. Unleashed introduced the boost formula, and the day levels were generally loved, the Werehog stages are mostly despised. Generations was another one that perfected 3D, but it was an anniversary title, and it also had a lot of 2D in it, even in the 3D levels. Colors was also mostly 2D. Lost World was like parkour and stuff, I don't know. Forces was just boring, and now they finally tried to be ambitious again with Frontiers by going for an open world / open zone format. I'm hoping the next 3D Sonic game follows the Frontiers formula and using the open zones to their max potential instead of just changing up the gameplay like they did after the adventure style. Then there's Shadow Generations, which actually did 3D and 2D pretty well in the same game, but that's kind of just based off of Sonic Generations, and it also came out, like 15 years after the original did, but I still think it's a step in the right direction, especially with the hub world being like an open zone from Frontiers. Sonic sequels have a huge range in terms of quality, but at least each 3D entry is unique because they kept changing up what they wanted to do with 3D. Now, besides the change from 2D to 3D, there are some sequels that change up the formula drastically for a series. Resident Evil has a couple. Up to Resident Evil 3, they had a clear formula focused heavily on survival horror, but Resident Evil 4 changed that. It upped the action component by a lot and became the default for the series going forward. But this didn't work as well for Resident Evil 5 and 6 because they leaned way too much in action, and kind of the whole horror point of it was just removed. After the series started to go downhill with those, they had another big overhaul with Resident Evil 7. It brought back the focus on the horror aspect rather than just ramping up the action. And for that, they made the shift to first person instead of the third person that the games were usually made in. This is an instance of sequels innovating to bring back the series. Let's talk about a sequel that brought the series back to life after it got left behind. It was honestly more like a reboot with how different it was. Kid Icarus is a standard NES game that got a sequel on the Game Boy. After that though, it didn't get anything new. That is until Sakurai included Pit from Kid Icarus in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. With that, they had to redesign him and make a 3D model of him to fit in the game, and this was based off the sprite from the NES game. This redesign was then used by Sakurai when he decided he wanted to make a new Kid Icarus game, Kid Icarus Uprising. Now, Kid Icarus Uprising is a 3D shooter on the 3DS that has super wacky controls, but man, it looks like a good game. I haven't played it much myself because I couldn't get used to the weird controls, so I'm hoping it gets a remaster sometime soon. This could also be the next formula for Kid Icarus if it does end up getting more sequels and wasn't just a one-off random game Sakurai decided to make. Now let's get back to Rare to talk about a sequel that instead of saving the franchise ended up killing it. Banjo and Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. Now, Rare had a great relationship with Nintendo. They made the Donkey Kong Country games, and they made Donkey Kong 64, which I mentioned earlier, and also Diddy Kong Racing. They made Conker's Bad Fur Day, which is a crazy game by the way. They made GoldenEye 007, and they made the 2 Banjo-Kazooie games on N64. And literally the day after Star Fox Adventures came out, another game that I can talk about, and also a game that Rare made, they got bought by Microsoft. So gone was Banjo-Kazooie on Nintendo, and on the Xbox 360 they made the next Banjo-Kazooie game, Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. Basically, you're able to create custom vehicles and do stuff with them. From what I've seen, this game isn't necessarily a bad game, but it's definitely not a good sequel to Banjo-Kazooie. And so Banjo-Kazooie has laid dormant for a long time. The only recent Banjo and Kazooie related projects have been the inclusion of the Banjo-Kazooie games in Rare Replay and their inclusion in Smash. There is a small chance that they make a comeback, but we've been hearing rumors about their comeback for years and still haven't heard a single thing. Now, even with all these new examples, I still have more sequels in mind that I want to talk about, but this video is getting kind of long, so part 3 could happen soon. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this sequel to the types of video game sequels. Make sure to like, comment, and click that subscribe button, and I'll see you all next time.